Josh Lloyd is an entrepreneur and data engineer from Provo, Utah. His career started as a 16-year-old, did you hear that? 16-year-old, managing the office of $1 million school bus business. You may have never known that there was such thing as a $1 million school bus business. I might tell you more about that. He earned a bachelor's degree in molecular biology with a minor in business at Brigham Young University, while winning a spot as a fellow in the inaugural year of the Crocker Innovations Fellowship, a year-long program where fellows practice innovation and entrepreneurship. He went on to earn a master's degree in entrepreneurial biotechnology at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Since graduating, Josh has gone on to run a biomedical startup that spun out of the Cleveland Clinic and then successfully changed his career to data engineering and data science, where he is currently a staff data engineer at Acquia and is partnered to build a custom software development firm. He also currently operates a micro private equity firm called LLoyd Ventures, which aims to help people in disadvantaged categories move from trapped to thriving through entrepreneurship and community. So please welcome Josh Lloyd.
Yep. Well, thank you all. I expect today will live or die or be successful based on kind of the interaction and the questions you have. So I'm hoping to get some from you. That's also true in life. Like, your success in life is going to largely depend on the questions you're asking yourself and also the questions that you're asking society and in general. So we're to kind of warm us up in that, we're gonna turn to our partners. I want everybody to kind of pair up in two. You could do three if necessary. If it's a little too awkward to only do two because, you know, the way things are spaced, that's fine. You could do three. Two is ideal. And I want you to answer as many of these questions in about 60 seconds with each other as possible. We'll talk about some of them afterwards. So first of all, if you don't know the person, you should at least, you know, ask them your name, tell your name. Where are you from? I'm interested to hear where everybody's from. And then from the place where you're at, how many business owners do you know? Okay, and then if you still have some time after that, you can talk about the challenge of how you would raise $1 million ransom if somebody you cared the most about got kidnapped. And then number 5, if there's still time left over, this is the least important question, but if you still have time after 60 seconds, you can answer that question. Okay, ready, set, go.
Hey, we know our names. We know names.
Okay.
Okay, all right, we're gonna do a little bit of polling here real quick. So I want to know where everybody's from. If you're from Utah, raise your hand. All right, so that's about half. If you're from the United States, including the people from Utah, raise your hand. So mostly people, if you're from the United States, for here you're from Utah, it seems like. Okay, if you're from out of the country, outside of the United States, go ahead and raise your hand. Awesome. So we have an international crew here. That's really cool. All right, now I want to see also by a raise of hand how many of you know at least one, personally know one business owner from where you live. Okay, at least, that's pretty much everybody's hands up. Okay, if you know at least 5, keep your hand up. Okay, if you know at least 10. All right, well that's pretty good. And if you know 50. All right, so we're somewhere between probably 10 and 50 for most of us. And that's really cool. Okay, also I'm really interested, did anybody have really creative ideas for how to raise $1 million ransom? Just two or three examples here. What'd you guys think of? It could be a terrible idea. It's okay. What do you got?
The government would probably be effective in either raising a ransom or resolving the problem.
Okay, so the government. How would you approach the government to give you the money for the ransom?
In that circumstance, it would be through the FBI.
Okay, FBI. All right, fair enough. What other idea?
My plan is just to scam.
The scam?
Scam a bank.
Scam a bank. Gotcha. Okay, so you'd commit a crime in order to solve the crime that you're in. You got to do what you got to. Yeah. No, that's totally cool. What? Any other ideas? anybody had for how to raise a ransom money.
Rob a bank, I feel like. There might be some leniency in your sentencing, you know, like extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, desperate times call for desperate measures. Well, and the point here is that if you can raise money to pay a ransom, you can raise money to start a business, right? You don't even necessarily have to rob a bank, but I suppose that is one way of potentially raising your money for your business, but not probably even the most accessible funds, right? You'd probably be asking friends, family for money. There's things like if you have equity in a home, if you have a life insurance policy, if you have a 401k, all sources of capital, and obviously rich uncles, or anybody else rich you might know. Like there's lots of different ideas. And actually, even if you're buying a business, I want to also make it clear that if you acquired a business rather than starting it up from scratch, a cash flowing, cash positive business, you don't have to spend any of your own money if you find the right opportunity. That business could pay for itself, and you wouldn't have to spend a dime out of your own pocket or even ask your uncle for any money either. So in terms of entrepreneurship, there's more than just, I think when we say the term entrepreneurship, we tend to think only in terms of starting from scratch. It's not the only form of entrepreneurship. There's lots of different ways to do it. And so I'm going to go through my journey, entrepreneurially speaking, but I want you to be listening, paying, and ask questions. So at the end, I'll go through my story, and then I have a range of topics you could potentially ask questions of. My journey is one of them, and some kind of keys on asking good questions. Obviously, curiosity, and you want to be asking how and why questions. Why did I do this? How did you do that? Right? And ideally, anytime you're asking any particular person any questions, you often want to be asking questions that are specific to them, that only they can answer, because that's where you're going to get the most interesting insights. Because if you can just go Google the answer, it probably qualifies as stupid questions. I don't know. Some people believe stupid questions exist and don't. I think stupid questions do exist, but you shouldn't feel too bad about asking them. I'm not going to hurt you. So. Also, another really important question to ask yourself, especially when you're trying to do something entrepreneurially, is ask yourself, why not? Mostly successful individuals are oftentimes challenging the status quo in the realm of entrepreneurship. So, all right, my journey, 2005, okay? I'm at age of 16. My mother, my lovely mother, who is actually in the back of the room right now, she was at church one day when another lady at our church stood up and said, I'm looking for somebody to manage my office. She ran a private school bus company here in Utah with her husband. And she ran the office out of her house, and she needed an office manager. So she needed somebody who could use Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, et cetera, et cetera. And my mom, I don't remember if you actually spoke up during the class or after the fact you told me about it or something like that. I think it was after the fact she told me about it. And I had just recently gotten a certificate from my high school because I had completed about probably 2 hours worth of work in Excel and Microsoft Word, but I got a certificate for it. And so I went, we contacted her, and she only lived a couple blocks away from me. I interviewed with her. She was impressed by the certificate. She shouldn't have been, okay? There was nothing special about that certificate. But it impressed her. I'm fairly certain I was probably the only person to apply too. So that tends to help. And I think what you'll find that one of the common themes of my career is big fish, small pond. I'm like the only qualified person, so-and-so knows, so I get the opportunity, is often how it goes. And so I got that job. It was really cool. I don't know anybody else my age that was 16 as an office manager doing office work in general. Did you have a question? Oh, clarify my story.
No, your story's great. She came to me after you started working and said, I love Joshua. He does what I tell him to do. The person before you would not take direction. She did it her own way. And that's what she liked about you, because you were willing to take direction and
Thank you. Good clarification. Yeah, teachability is absolutely critical. Yeah. Yeah, I was still in high school. So I can't remember what time of the year. I think I applied at the beginning of the summer. So I was working full time over the summer. But then when school came around, I started doing part-time. But actually, I worked there basically every year throughout my high school years. And either I would or I wouldn't work during the school year a little bit. And then summers, I would work full-time there. And by the time, the next event in life came after I graduated, I worked from there until I left on my mission for my church. And I worked there full time after that. And by the time I left for my mission, so when I first walked into that office was just covered in it was the messiest. It was messier than my room as a teenager. So that's saying something. There's papers absolutely everywhere, on top of the computer, on the floor, just absolutely everywhere. And by the time I left, that place was nice and neat, clean and organized. I had learned critical skills between Excel, Microsoft Word. I learned QuickBooks, basic bookkeeping. I learned all sorts. I mean, just the exposure to the business world for the first time was phenomenal. It was a massive learning experience. And really kind of what took me, because my interests at that time were either music or biology. And I never had really considered business until I had that experience, and I was coming back from my mission. So I served 2 years in Argentina, serving a mission for my church, and I came back, started college at BYU. Again, I thought I was going to start into music, okay? And I was practicing, ready to go do tryouts, and I spent a day, not even a day, it was like 3 hours with one of the professors there at BYU. In the jazz studies, because I wanted to do jazz, right? And I spent a day, and just that time, I realized I was nowhere near the caliber of musician that I needed to be able to get into that program. So after kind of waffling on the idea for like a month or two after that, I was like, forget that, I'm going with plan B. My plan B was molecular biology, okay? So I think one lesson you might be able to take from that is that it doesn't matter if you haven't figured life out yet. If you're in college right now, like most people don't. And most people graduate college and they still haven't figured out life. There's still plenty of opportunity. So don't stress about it. Just, try to find things that you're enjoying doing. And so that's what I did. So I got into the molecular biology program. I did that, and then that's when I got involved in the fellowship, I forgot the first business. Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you my worst business decision ever. So I had finished working for the school bus company. It ended up kind of like shutting down in a way. Plus I was doing full-time school. But I got hooked up with another guy who had this brilliant business idea. Well, he thought it was brilliant, and I thought it was brilliant too. In hindsight, it was anything but brilliant, okay? His idea was to sell. What his pitch was is that he had a proprietary business idea, a proprietary account with somebody where he could get really cheap computers, like laptops. And he wanted to put branding on the laptops so that you could give them away as like corporate gifts, like how big companies give during Christmas time or whatever it is, okay? So that was his idea. He had. And so I was like, he didn't have any capital. I actually had $2,000 in my savings account. So I was like, hey, this could really turn into something, and we'd all make some money. We dropped, of that $2,000, I think half of it went to furniture and office rent before we even had a product in the door. I burned through the last of the money getting the first of the prototypes, and it was literally just a prototype. And that computer was total piece of crap, barely even booted up or started, and had like a bootlegged version of an operating system on it, okay? Because you know what his proprietary account was with a supplier? It was Alibaba, Okay, Alibaba.com, I don't know if you've heard of that. It's basically like Amazon, but for Chinese-based companies. You can order things in bulk there. There's no you go and you sign up, you log in, you create your own login and user password. There was nothing proprietary. But I didn't know any better. I didn't know anything, really, at that point in time. But I tell you that experience to save you from doing the same mistakes. Don't do that. And never, like your first money into a new business should never be into buying furniture. Yes, like just worst idea ever. So anyways, fun, painful, but you know, I learned so much from that experience. It was kind of the worst and the best $2,000 I ever spent in weird ways. So I got married a little bit after that. Yeah, that actually got, because that was the $2,000 I should have spent on the wedding ring, and I didn't, and anyways. But then I got into the Crocker Innovation Fellowship, which was a year-long program where we literally practiced entrepreneurship techniques. If you've heard of the lean startup model, that was a lot of what we were doing and were practicing. So we would get together in teams during the day. We'd go out by night and we'd prototype things. We'd try to get customers. We'd validate our business ideas, or we'd sync them. And we'd get an internship at maybe a startup if we could, et cetera, et cetera. And that was mind-blowing for me, and it was awesome. I totally shouldn't have been there. I think the only reason why I was in there was, again, because I was probably one of only 2 people who interviewed for that program from the biology department. And since they didn't have any other applicants from the biology department, I got in. Because the point was to get students from virtually every department at BYU. And so anyways, again, big fish, small pond. It worked out for me. Okay, during that program, or shortly thereafter, I tried to license a technology out of BYU. That's one of the things we learned about in the innovation, is that, has anybody heard of a technology transfer office before?
We actually had a guy.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, that's right. You mentioned that to me.
So
Yeah.
they all should have.
I got one who raised their hand. All right. Okay. Tech transfer offices are fascinating. I won't go into it since theoretically you were told about it already. But I almost licensed the technology there and tried to run with it. But long story. I can go into that if you're interested in that. But ended up not happening. Went to get a master's degree at Case Western instead. So this is kind of like another big turning point, I would say. As I found this program in entrepreneurial biotechnology, total mouthful. I think half of my time there was spent practicing saying those 2 words together, because they're really hard to say without tripping over yourself. So it was a lot of what was going on in the Crocker Innovation Fellowship, but it was applied to a biotechnology sphere. So the innovation process for kind of typical companies and then kind of tech transfer from tech transfer businesses, they kind of work in opposite directions. In that, in a normal business, you're usually trying to find, at least when you're running kind of a lean startup model, is you're usually starting with a problem and then solving it and then taking that to market that way. Whereas in tech transfer, it works from the opposite direction because you have a solution already. You have a technology. Now you need to figure out whether or not that solution and technology even solves a problem that anybody even cares about, right? And so similar processes still, but kind of opposite ways of thinking about it. And it was fascinating to kind of learn and practice both during those times. So during part of that program is that I'm supposed to get an internship, and this is one of those jobs where I got through networking. Well, I mean, I would say all but one of my jobs I've gotten through networking. It's the most common way of finding a job. So applying just kind of like a cold application, it's not very successful in general. Networking is way more effective. That's one of the things I've learned. So one of the students in my program who was a year ahead of me had my job at OptiQuest before I had it. And he said he was leaving to go do work on another startup. He said, "Did you want to interview for my position?" So I did. I'm fairly certain I was the only person interviewed for that position. So I got offered it, and I had been trying to get other ones, and nothing else was really panning out. So I took it, and I had to have one for the program anyway. So it all worked out. That would be, my professor thought that this business was a loser. Turns out 5 years later he was right, but at the time I didn't know that. I thought it was like, hey, I thought I had a shot, and I think it did have a shot. I think we still just, in hindsight, I think I did things wrong still, but I was grateful that over the course of time, Cleveland Clinic, who did most of the investment, spent about $2 million, I think, in the state of Ohio. Kind of paid $2 million for me to learn a lot. So I'm grateful for that. So OptiQuest was it was an ophthalmology-based business. So we used 3D modeling and machine learning techniques in order to predict the outcome of eye surgeries, most specifically like LASIK surgery. And we could do other things on top of that, but that was the big market, was LASIK primarily. Now here's the interesting story about that. I got that internship. 3 months later, my boss quit. I was the only person in the company at that time, unless you include the founder, who really only spent maybe like 3 to 5 hours a week on anything related to the business. It was his technology so that we were spinning out and trying to make marketable. So here I am, 3 months in, my boss quit, and basically the whole point of this is to go out and there are 2 tracks. You can either go and license the technology to somebody else to develop, or we could develop it ourselves. And I hadn't been taught how to license to other companies and have them develop. I didn't know how to run that process. I only knew how to develop product. That is what I've been taught and trained for. And so I was like, okay, as an intern, I went and hired our first software engineer. That doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it happened. I hired our first software engineer, and I put together our team. We had some researchers who were in the founder's lab who was also helping us. And we just started creating product. I was forced to learn lots of things there: quality management systems, how to deal with the FDA, product development, product management, marketing, and it was fantastic. Again, learned a ton there, but I was an intern for the first year or two, even though I was kind of running the show. It was kind of weird. Until I graduated, and then I got an official position with actually decent pay. So, all right, I'm touched on that. Okay, 2017, this is a couple years later, a guy I served my mission with in Argentina, Joel is his name, he contacted me. We were really good friends on the mission, and he's a software developer. He wanted to start up his own custom dev shop, and he needed to start a business. He wanted clients from the US. I didn't understand, like, why do you want clients from the US? I have since learned that companies outside of the US are generally terrible to deal with. I don't know if anybody knows that firsthand here, but they're really hard to get paid. They don't value your services. It's really, really tough. So that's why you see a lot of businesses, kind of service-based businesses, kind of doing the offshoring concepts, because people in the US, companies in the US pay their bills. Who knew? So we kind of launched that, and I was running that on the side. I wasn't really involved other than doing administrative work, so I kind of set up the entity and been doing all the bookkeeping and whatnot. So I feel like I need to switch to the other side here. Maybe these guys can't see anything. So after about 3 more years of that, OptiQuest in 2019, we were about to launch, but we really hadn't proved enough of a market for this particular product. The thing that kind of killed that particular technology was the idea that LASIK surgery is already an extremely successful surgery. Just even on average, like 93, 95+% of the time, they nail it in their surgeries, and the person's seeing better, and the person sees 20/20 or better, right? So there's not a whole lot of room to improve, even though our technology was at least getting that good or a little bit better. It's just there's not enough demand or a market there. So not as many people are going to be willing to pay for it. I think that that's kind of what was going to kill us. We had some other markets we could have gone into, but we kind of discovered that a little too late, and we had poured too much money into all of the other development. Anyway, so in 2019, it was getting shut down. About a year before that, the guy who was doing our machine learning stuff was kind of indicated he was going to leave. So that meant somebody needed to take over the machine learning aspect for him. And I decided that that's something I wanted to do. I had been looking to potentially change my career for months at that point, and I had investigated a concept called community development because I wanted to do something to help fight poverty, and that's what community development does. But I couldn't find any jobs there because it's a really, really small job market. So instead, I'd been telling people for years, if I had to do everything all over again, I'd do software engineering, some form of it. So one thing led to another, and kind of doing data science, machine learning, AI, big data, analytics, any of those terms, that's kind of the space that I started moving into, and started doing that for the business on top of all the product management and whatnot. So by the time the company shut down in December of that year, I was already pretty well positioned to get my first job in data engineering. So that's where when I got hired by a company called Wyden. Wyden does, it's called digital asset management. And so if you think about all of the photos that might go to your branding, put on your website, or like product images that might go on an e-commerce website, on Amazon, all those images, that's the sort of image that is held in a digital asset management software like what Wyden does. There's a big market there, surprisingly. You've probably never thought of that as a market, but there's a market, and there's a big one. So I hired on at Wyden. That company had been around for 70 plus years. Like, that's pretty rare. And so I thought that was really cool. And I was like, hey, this, it's owned by a family, it's private owned. I thought, they're never going to sell. So I'm going to have a really steady job. It's going to be really great. Well, 6 months later, they got acquired. The business was the family was getting out of it, and they sold it to a company called Acquia. So that's who I now work with. I'm sporting their merch, whatever you want to call it, and so I started. I've been working for Acquia since then. So that's my regular day job, is as a data engineer, building the data platforms, analytics platforms, machine learning stuff for Acquia. Last year, so this is less than a year ago, we moved out to Costa Rica with my family, all 6 boys. I have 6 boys. They're not here for good reasons, because you wouldn't be able to hear me if they were here. They'd be making too much noise. But I bring this up only because this was a big pivotal kind of life change for us. Felt like a new mission call. My 1-year-old child drowned in a swimming pool while we were there. Now, he was revived and flown to the children's hospital, and now he is perfectly fine. But that was a very kind of a spiritual wake-up call for me. I know that, entrepreneurship and spiritual stuff, maybe that doesn't necessarily go together. But I think that it is important because oftentimes successful entrepreneurs will oftentimes feel like they have a mission in life. And oftentimes it's, technology related or something, but, passion comes from somewhere. And this was one of the turning points, I think, in my life, and it's still relatively fresh and new. But partly from experiences there, I'm doing kind of what I'm doing now. I still have my day job, but I've recently launched a micro private equity firm called LLoyd Ventures. And as was described in my bio, the point here in LLoyd Ventures is to make a solid difference in the world, like one individual, one family at a time, right? I have long believed that entrepreneurship is powerful and can make people's lives better. And so what I'm doing now is putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm using all of my entrepreneurial techniques, using businesses and acquisitions there to make people's lives better. So an example of this is finding somebody who's maybe struggling to put food on the table. Currently, like one of the person we're working for is a lady I met out in Costa Rica. She is a widow. Her husband died a couple of years ago. She has virtually no income since that point, basically living off of donations from friends because not even her family can or is willing to help her out. And so, but she's got two gorgeous properties that she could be doing so much with. And so our first mission is to help her sell her properties and get her out of that situation where she finally has the money to retire and move on and do something a little bit, that brings her a little bit more meaning and passion in life. So that's an example of the sort of thing that we want to solve for somebody. She can't do it herself because she just doesn't understand how to sell properties or scale a business that can do that. And she just doesn't have the energy. I think she just gets overwhelmed easily at her age with all the sorts of responsibilities. Okay, I don't know how much time we have left, but that's more or less 10 minutes. All right, so you can ask me any questions that you're interested in my life journey. Hopefully some of that was helpful for you, but there's other topics. I can go through things on life advice. There's a whole bunch of slides here. Mental models, which I think is absolutely key for learning expertise in anything, is building a proper mental model. So if that's a new concept to you, you've never heard of that, I can explain that to you. I've got a number of mental models to go through, big list there. Can talk about, I've developed entrepreneurship worksheets that kind of have, in my opinion, have distilled all of the big kind of lean startup, business model generation, distilled like all of that into just a few worksheets that I've used repeatedly, probably 20 plus times to vet good and bad ideas alike on whether or not I want to pursue those. There's an example. So anyways, yeah. Questions? Thoughts? Opinions?
It's a good idea to get, like if you're doing e-commerce, get sales first and then get the product.
I would say that, especially in an e-commerce fashion, it kind of depends if you're developing your product from scratch, or you're kind of buying an already existing product that has a market. Based on your question, I'm assuming you're talking about the first, where you're starting from scratch. Oh, you already have an existing product, okay?
But I don't have it in inventory. I just have sales. And let's say I get the inventory a little late. I can say, oh, sorry for the delay. I'll add, I don't know, free complimentary.
Yeah, gotcha. So I would say that the market problem is always the first thing you need to solve before, ideally, you would solve the market problem, whether or not there's a market, before you would ever solve kind of like the actual kind of product problem. Most of the time we can find a way to solve a kind of problem in a physical world or in a digital world. The question is whether or not there's a market for it. So there's a video I watched. I don't know if you guys have watched the podcast or listened to the podcast, A Diary of a CEO. A few weeks ago, he interviewed a guy, and I wish I could remember his name, but it was a big entrepreneur in the UK. And that was basically his same advice. Is like, we live in a world now where it's actually really easy to test your market. You create a landing page, or you go kind of even knock doors. I've even gone to knock doors to validate ideas. And basically, what you do is you create like a waiting list, and you say, I have this thing. If you want this, like sign up for the waiting list. And so by the time you've even bought your first set of inventory, you've developed a waiting list of 50, 100, whatever quota you need to meet in order to make it even work to order even your first batch of inventory. You set a waiting list quota of that much. You put it out there, creating a landing page, which is super free. Launchrock.com, I think, can set up a free landing page, collect email addresses and whatnot. And you get that waiting list, and then you have already proven your market at that point before you've even spent $1. I highly recommend anytime you have a business idea, if you can leverage that model of validating through, again, either a landing page, knocking doors to find what's interesting. I've taken a team to a mall and just like, I had a prototype of like I think it was a baby chair. We walked that around and we asked random women in the mall, hey, what do you think about this stroller? To validate ideas. So validate your market before you spend $1 on your product is my modus operandi. Yep. Any other questions?
What about software engineering did you like, and just what attracted you to it?
I have always been a big spreadsheet junkie. So I got, obviously, like I've said, I got involved in spreadsheets when I was a teenager. I inherited that from my father. He's a big spreadsheet junkie. I just enjoy the data. I enjoy the analysis. There's just something about it that just has always kind of like kept me engaged and interested. And so that's where it started. And the programming piece, I dabbled with some of the online programs that kind of teach you to code that are free out there, and I just like really enjoyed it. To me, programming is basically, it's like a puzzle. I don't know if any of you enjoy putting puzzles together. I really enjoy putting puzzles together because you always get that jolt of excitement when you finally get a piece that fits. And so that's what software development is for me. It's like you're coding something, you're trying to get it to work, and it's not working, it's not working. So you try a million different ideas until it finally works, and you're like, yes, but then you're addicted and you have to keep going and you just can't stop. So that's what software engineering and data analysis is for me. I really enjoy the fact that data can actually solve really deep and kind of unknowable problems. Like, not that the problems aren't known, but that you didn't know you could solve it because you didn't have the data prior, and then it just opens up a wealth of kind of solutions that you didn't know existed. Yep. Yep.
So Josh, you mentioned that if you were to go back, possibly, you would have started with software engineering or data engineering or something. And yet you also shared this really great journey, all these things you learned along the way. So what advice would you give to students who are trying to figure out what they want to do, where to go, to make decisions and figure out which path to take or what to major in, those kind of things?
I would say that at this point in your life, explore as much as possible, because right now it's when first of all, you're probably going to learn some of the fastest that you're going to be able to. You have the most opportunities to you, especially in a college like this, where all your professors, especially here at Snow College. I don't know much about Snow College, but it sounds like it's very geared towards making sure the students are successful and can really explore. So take advantage of that, because you don't know what you don't know. And also, if you read books like The Originals by Adam Grant, I think is his name, like the successful people, the people who come up with creative ideas are often, there's this concept of the T-shaped individual, where they're kind of decent in a lot of different categories, but then they're really deep into a specific category. And oftentimes, research shows that most people spend their first 10, 15, 20 years in their career getting that broad set of knowledge before they ever figure out what they're going to go deep in. And that was definitely my case. I remember running into a recruiter at a job fair at BYU, and I had my resume, which I thought it was all impressive because, hey, I was running an office at the age of 16. He looked at my resume. It's all over the board. I mean, I've molecular biology, music, business management, like just everywhere. And he literally spent 5 seconds looking at my resume. He's like, "You're all over the board. What is it you want to do with your life?" I was totally taken off guard. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to fail in life because this recruiter doesn't think I'm worth anything. Totally not true. Totally not true. Because honestly, I say if I had to do it all over again, I'd learn programming, but to be honest, I don't think I regret any of my career choices because it's given me such a broad breadth of knowledge that I feel competent enough to be able to do what I'm now passionate about, which is helping people through entrepreneurship. And I think that that's important. The breadth of knowledge is more important than just a single set of knowledge. Any other questions?
So I have a follow-up.
Yep.
What are some cool things, opportunities that you see that you're interested in learning right now that you think this is a great opportunity for students to learn something about it?
So maybe I'm just a little bit biased, but I do think AI is interesting. I don't think it's going to destroy the world. I think that there's massive opportunities. I actually think one of the most interesting applications of AI is actually using it as your own personal tutor. You can literally go and ask Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever, like start delving into a particular topic that interests you. And you can gain really good summaries of a lot of different topics just by knowing how to ask questions. And it'll do a decent job. It'll only get you so far. After that, it's all up to you to go figure out. I mean, just the fact that, and maybe I'm going to, displease my hosts on this, but like, there's just such a wealth of information out there on the internet. Like, you almost don't need a college anymore, right? A college is unfortunately a box that we have created socially that you have to check in order to get most jobs. But that's not even the best information is in the textbooks, okay? There's a wealth of it. You need to have the skills of being able to sort just data, junk garbage information to actual relevant insights. That is one of the most critical skills that you need, I have to use in my job in data analysis. So there's garbage in, garbage out. You have to be able to filter out the noise and find the nuggets of insight that are unique. That's what gives you a competitive edge personally and also in business, is when you have a unique insight that you basically shouldn't have because no one else has it. And that's a critical skill that everyone, I think, anybody who's going to rise above the average is going to need some level of that skill for sure.
I think that's all of our time.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.